Is that working? Okay. I think it is. Yeah. Okay, good. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Stephen. I kind of thought I would start a little bit with a bit of an introduction about who I am and, well, I don't know why I'm here necessarily, why I think I'm here, and hopefully we'll have an interesting conversation after my presentation about how what I'm talking about relates to what Charlotte just talked about. I guess what I should first say is that Charlotte is like one of the most influential people probably in the last 5 years of my life, I would guess. No, and I have to say. I have to say that in particular because I had grown up in quite an evangelical Christian household in the States. You can tell probably by my accent. That had a very negative, very evil view of women in the church that I grew up and was quite baked into. And so it has been like an important kind of redemption, I think, for me to have so many strong women be a part of whatever my spiritual life is now. So thank you for that. I think it's important for me to say that first. Yeah, so I'm Stephen. You can tell, like I said, by my accent, I'm originally from not around here, from the States. I grew up in the Midwest in the U.S. Like I said, my family is quite evangelical Christian. What that means is some different things in different places in the States. For me, that meant, baptism as a believer, immersion, believer's prayer, sinner's prayer. I grew up from a very early age with this kind of sense that you needed to be saved, and you need to be saved like as young as you possibly could be. So as a child, I probably asked Jesus into my heart, many times, every time that I could, kind of hoping it would take at some point. And so I grew up with this kind of vision of God as being, we talked a lot about God being love, but it's hard for me to think about God being love in kind of the context that we were talking about judgment so much. And also a real clear feeling that the world was going to be ending very soon. I think the particularly in the 80s in the U.S., that was we were all waiting for the end of the world, like imminently. And there were a lot of, kids' books that I was reading that were about, about the tribulation, rapture, that sort of things. That was kind of what I had grown up in. Not a part of any of this was the gospel, I think, in the sense that I've come to believe or think about the gospel now, which is sort of what Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, and any of the kinds of things about thinking about your neighbor in kind of a realistic way. It was mostly just about your neighbor was a person that you told that they were going to hell, and they either accepted that or didn't accept it. So that's the kind of the Christianity that I grew up in. And mission for me, as I think about the word mission, doesn't have a really good feeling in my mind. In part because I was actually a missionary. So I went to college, to university, and studied English. And I went after I finished my degree to Japan to teach English. But I was teaching English as a part of a church, and in this church, we were doing Bible lessons as well. So the idea was you would come for the English classes and stay for the Bible lessons. Bible lessons were mandatory though, so people would. I think they wanted to as well. It was good English conversation practice. But we were also teaching the Bible in English, which was strange, actually, as I think about it now. But that was a part of the draw of the whole thing, was to practice your English. Very quickly in kind of my time in Japan, in probably the first 2 months, it became really clear to me that I had no idea what I was doing, both in terms of teaching English, which just because I was a good, as a speaker of English, that did not make me a good teacher, but also in terms of the Bible and what the Bible actually meant. And we talk about missionaries and mission in that context, it'd be about teaching the Bible. It became very clear to me that the teaching of the Bible was very much related to what you already kind of believed about the world, and the theology that was sort of baked into your worldview was very important in terms of how you read the Bible. And this was really clear to me in a couple of instances. I'll just tell you one kind of instance where I think was the first time that it really my faith was really challenged, I think, for the first time. I was having a conversation. We were talking about something from the Bible. I don't remember what the passage was, but we were talking to a guy who was, at the time, would have been in his 70s. Really wonderful guy. Was really interested in learning English, and we were talking about his prep. He was too young to have participated in the war. So maybe 70s was, I would have to work out the maths of how old he was exactly, but he was talking about, preparing with bamboo swords for when the US soldiers were going to come and they were going to fight them. And I was sitting there as a 21-year-old American guy thinking, what do I have to say to this person about the world, anything? What do I have to say to them? And after that, I kind of was on a path away from that kind of faith. And within a year, I had left the mission. I moved to a different part of Japan, started teaching English kind of properly. I did a master's degree in applied linguistics through the University of Birmingham. I got married, and I moved to the UK in 2008 to do my PhD in applied linguistics at the Open University. So that was kind of my path initially about what Christianity and what mission was. In sort of skipping ahead a little bit, I guess, as I've been living in Birmingham, I moved to Birmingham in 2014, I guess. I was working at Newman University, the Catholic university in Bartley Green. And I was doing research on language and religion. That was kind of the area that I was most interested in. And I was interested in how people disagree about language and religion, particularly online was where my research was. But around 2016 was for the first time that I started interacting a little bit with people in communities who were doing kind of interfaith, I call it interfaith work. When you talk about interfaith work, I think a lot of people have this idea of, talking about theology or the roundtable discussions with Sikhs and Jews and Christians and Muslims. I got interested in community organizing, which is a much different approach to that kind of interfaith work, in the sense that community organizing doesn't focus on the parts of faith, the theological parts. It was about the ways that people of faith can work together around shared values and making the world, it sounds a little bit trite, I guess, when you say it, but making the world a better place in the sense that we're trying to reduce inequality, bring about whatever I've come to believe that the kingdom of heaven is, right? The kind of thing that we're meant to be working for as we believe the gospel, I guess. Around that time also, I had started attending St. Peter's Church in Harborne. At that point, I would have said that I was an atheist, and attending St. Peter's was sort of the first time that I had really experienced Christian faith as a not something that you believed, that the belief was the most important thing, but that it was more about, I felt for the first time kind of the love of God in interaction in the community in a real compelling way. And I'll tell one more quick story about that. Well, I was the vicar there at the time was a guy called Father Graham. Really, I don't know if you met Graham at all, but Pete would know Graham quite well. I was not going up for communion at all, and Graham said to me, like, "Why are you not? You've been coming for many years. We ended up talking about not going up for communion." I was like, "I don't really believe. I'm not really." I wouldn't describe myself as a Christian. I don't believe it. I had grown up in an evangelical church. Like, if you take communion, you're not a believer. Like, lightning hits you, right? That's not a good thing, right? And Graham said to me, I didn't want to say specifically what he had said, but was sort of like, the communion is God's free gift to you, right? And that free gift to you comes without any obligation. And it was the first time that I actually felt what I could describe as unconditional love in a kind of Christian context. In that this thing was being given to you without obligation, not an obligation of belief, not an obligation of anything, but that you just accept it, and that's all that it is. I shouldn't say it's all that it is. That's what's required of you, is to go up and accept it. And I thought to myself, I can do that. And after I had started doing that, my relationship with the church and with sort of belief changed. I still don't think I believe. I wouldn't describe myself as a believer. I wouldn't describe myself as a Christian. But that act of participating in communion, I think, is something for me that kind of goes beyond describing myself one way or another. So you could describe me any way that you want to. That's kind of my positioning of myself. I did all of that to kind of give you a sense of how I think about the world, how I think about faith, and how I think about the role of the church in the world. So that when I talk about whatever it is I'm going to talk about now, you kind of have an idea of the way that I think about religion and faith in particular. So sorry for the long wind-up, but I like telling that story, and I can't tell it very often in other places. If you're interested in my academic work, if you go to just my name, which you'll have, these are sort of the things that I've worked on in terms of writing, and you can see links to these different projects. I've been really interested. Just sort of the main things have been around people arguing and talking about faith in online spaces. I'm very interested in that. I'm interested in the relationship between cognition, thinking about faith, and religious practice and belief. So I've written quite a bit about metaphor as well. I've been interested in this one on the bottom here about nurturing healthy diversity in church schools. I've been really interested in church schools and the extent to which people of different faith can, we use that word flourish. I don't know. It's a bit of a I don't know, a vague word. It's a metaphor.
I'm laughing because we have in our church school a Flourish project.
Okay.
Which is funded by the church commissioners.
Okay.
Beth is our creative schools commissioner.
Okay.
Who works with that project. So I also don't love the word flourish, but I
yes.
happily use it. That's why I didn't call the stuff I do flourish.
Yeah. So we're interested in flourishing as a difficult word for I guess the feeling that children can, in whatever faith they have, come to a church school and see their values and see their belief reflected in the way that we talk about belief in schools. I am the chair of the board of governors at St. Michael's in Bartley Green, which is a school that has significant challenges in terms of the community that it serves, and I am really proud of the work that we do around talking about religion and faith in that context. We had a very good what's the not Ofsted, but the SIAMS. Yeah, SIAMS is the church school version of Ofsted. Inspection of schools, and we did really well in that, and I was really proud of that because of the kinds of things that they were talking about as our ability to talk about faith in a way that meant something for the children. Okay, so I am here ostensibly to talk about community organizing. Charlotte said that there's sort of some complexities. I've just described. I hope you get a sense that my beliefs and all this sort of stuff there's a lot of complexity to sort of the way that I think about faith and religion. I was involved with community organizing from 2016 with Citizens UK, which St. George's is a member of Citizens UK. Citizens UK is an alliance of trade unions, schools, churches, mosques, different community organizations that work together to create change within Birmingham. I'm very proud of having worked with Citizens UK since 2016 until just this last year. I was involved with the leadership team and involved in community organizing in that capacity. On September 21st, I was selected by the Labour Party to be a city council candidate in the Moseley ward for the by-election. There was a by-election in Moseley in September, and so I was chosen to stand for that post. And since I became a partisan political actor, I couldn't community organize in the same way, and so I stepped down from all my roles community organizing with Citizens UK. I lost that election by about 400 and some odd votes, but I'm standing again in May for the same seat, hoping not to lose again, but we'll see. So I'm coming at this now from a community organizing, from a perspective also of political power, and thinking about. I'm thinking more about how we the different ways that we can assert influence as well, again, as people of faith, as Christians, if that's what you're interested in terms of mission as well. It How do we speak to power from those different perspectives? So when I want to start by talking about faith and talking about mission, I think we all need to think about the faith and the belief that we have, the practices we have, as being rooted in a particular place at a particular time, which is, a key thing that I think is one of the strengths of the Church of England, from my experience, is this thinking that churches can be different in different places. Whereas I came from an evangelical background that said we all have to believe basically the same thing in the same places, and it has to look more or less the same. That works sometimes, but it doesn't reflect, I think, the diversity that we see in the world. And what does it mean to be a Christian in Birmingham is going to mean something than it means to be in anywhere else in the world, right? Or what does it mean to be a Christian in Bartley Green? Is going to mean something different than it means in Harborne or in Moseley as well. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's an important thing for people to think about. And I think the church does a good understand, or does a better job, maybe not a great job of it, but a better job than other traditions. Our understanding of the world is historical. So what do I mean by that? I mean, we come to our context in the place that we're in, and we have an understanding that comes from everything that's come before us. And we need to be able to recognize and understand that history. At the same time, understand that we're not sort of we've come to the place that we have because of the experiences of people that have come before us, and that is influencing how we look at things now. That we can't be ahistorical in saying, well, because things have changed, we can't think about what's happened in the past. Because of that history, we are limited in some ways. You can think about it as limitations, or you can think about it in terms of the kind of technical term we use for it is affordances. It gives you possibilities to do particular kinds of things based in where you are. And I think the example of this is people. So sometimes I'll be talking to people about the church and like whether or not the church is a useful vehicle for change within the UK, and whether or not we should look to something else, something different. The organization of the church in this country is pretty remarkable and has a lot of potential to do a lot of good, just in terms of the context of having a lot of buildings, for example. So for me, if people say, well, we need to completely move away from the way that the church has been in the past or how we've done faith in the past, you can't really do that, in part because we have all this kind of physical apparatus around us, right? And that allows us to do, like I said, particular things and things we have to take into account, right? This last one here, this is an interesting typo. It should be also the understanding of the world, but it is the word. So you can read that in a religious way if you want to. Is personal and emergent. So not only are we in a context, a particular social context, and not only is that a historically placed thing, but we're all individuals as well. And so my understanding of the world, as I've described it to you, again, the point of telling your history is so that you can say, as you understand what I'm telling you, you understand that it comes from a very particular perspective. And by being honest about that and being open about that, it takes a bit of a risk, right? Because I've opened up to you, I've told you some personal things about me and about myself. But by doing that, I've offered an opportunity for you to do the same thing, and for us to have a conversation about faith, I think, in a more open way. I think if I came in here and I said, I'm happy to talk about this because I know Charlotte, but I'm an atheist, and really, all this stuff is, I don't really actually believe it. That's a much different position to take that would create a kind of relationship with us that's different, right? So I think that we need to think about the ways that we can open relationships up with that kind of honesty, that kind of openness creates opportunities to talk about faith, but talk about everything else in an exciting way. It's a key part of community organizing that I'll get to near the end of my talk. So if you look at this, I'm sorry, just at the very beginning, if you want to go back to this bit.ly short URL, is just JCH for John Cadbury House, 11 December. You can get the slides for this as well and see everything if you'd like to. If you want to share that as well afterwards, Charlotte, that's okay. So you can watch, the reason that I said that was there's a video here that you can watch if you want to from Citizens UK. Again, I'm not affiliated with Citizens now, but I still, obviously, the churches have been involved in it, and I'm still very much an advocate of the churches being involved with Citizens. So the point about it is working with established institutions within a community to look for the things that are in the self-interest of the community organizations that they're working with. So one of the things that's I think is really unique about community organizing in relation to charity or other kinds of work is it says what's important to you or what's interesting to you is the focus of what it is that we're doing. So you start off with self-interest. You don't start off with asking people, what do you want to see for another community? What do you want to see for your own community? What do you want for St. George's? That is the starting point of the conversation, and being honest about that as well, right? What do we want for the Anglo-Catholic community? We can ask that question. That's an important starting point for the question, or for the thinking about our role in the community. But we're also looking for ways that we can find things that we're interested in that other people are interested in as well. And not just other people, not just other individuals, but other institutions and organizations. And again, as I kind of pop on my different kinds of hats from academic to community organizer to political actor, one of the things that I've seen working in politics for the last 2 months or 3 months is that organizations and institutions they have different levels of popularity in different places, but the value of an institution and information and all the apparatus of institutions is really, really good. And it's very, very hard for, we know this already, building political parties is a very difficult thing to do. That's because building institutional trust, building a brand, building information structures, all that stuff takes a lot of time and energy. So the extent to which you can work within organizations that already exist, I really have come to believe that that's a valuable thing. And we should look for organizations that are robust in the sense that they don't depend too much on individual people. So if you have an organization where the organization is well known because of an individual, that is a problematic organization, because it's too dependent on that individual. And so we look for institutions, and we look for building institutions, we want leaders within those institutions, but the point is to make the institution strong. We want St. George's to be strong as an institution, regardless of whether or not Mother Charlotte is there or Father Sam is there, because we don't know what the future holds for any individual person. Hopefully you'll be there for a very long time, but the idea is that we want institutions to outlast the people that are serving them. With community organizing, and the focus is on being nonpartisan and not taking a position that's related to one particular political party. It's weird for me to say this now as a person who's taken a position with a political party. There are trade-offs with working with political parties and joining political parties. I would say that for religious institutions in particular, the value of staying nonpartisan is that you aren't beholden then to anyone. I think that's probably the most important thing. I think you can also then work across boundaries in a really important way. It shouldn't matter who the city councilor is in Edgbaston, right? If you're for St. George's, you should be able to work with any one of those things. And the extent to which it becomes clear that an individual is a part of a political party and associated with a political party, that becomes dangerous, I think. And so it's right for me to step back from my community organizing role, because you don't want to become associated with a particular party. So community organizers are working in the organizations, trying to develop leaders in those organizations. Again, like I said, with the goal of strong institutions that have staying power in communities. We don't want to work with the newest, flashiest thing that's come up, because we don't know about the extent to which that thing is going to be there for the next 5 or 10 years. It doesn't mean that you're trying to avoid people who aren't a part of institutions, but I think it's always worth thinking about why individuals are trying to start new things, whether or not there's genuinely a need for a new thing. Sometimes there is, a lot of times there is, but when it comes to effectiveness, I think working within institutions is the best thing when it comes to community organizing. This is different, of course, than campaigning as well, too. Not just political campaigning, but campaigning on particular issues. When it comes to things like, I think one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is refugee welcome, right? One of the things you could organize around is welcoming refugees. I have a Brummies Against Racism poster up in my window. That's good, I think, because people see that and know that I'm not a racist. Maybe I am a racist with a poster up in my window, but I'm signaling to people that I'm not a racist, and I think that's a good thing, right? And I think the more people signaling that sort of thing, particularly as we talk about like the flags in the community, that's a good thing. That poster does nothing for helping refugees actually in the community. And I think we need to be able to recognize that as well. That I don't judge anyone for the kinds of symbols that they wear. You want to wear a scarf or a bandana and to symbolize solidarity with someone, but that's not actually helping somebody. It might make people aware of something, but it doesn't actually change the situation for a refugee family. We know this because I know St. George's has been involved, St. Peter's has been involved with welcoming refugee families. And when it comes to getting a poster up in a window, that's one thing. When it comes to, can somebody come to the family tomorrow and help them with their heating bill? Not pay it. I don't want any money from you to pay the heating bill. What I need you to do is to sit down with this person who doesn't speak English very well and explain to them how Octopus Energy Online works. That is a much, much different ask for people. Or to respond to an email about council tax on a Sunday afternoon. That's a difficult thing to do. I'm saying these because these are things that we've had to deal with our refugee family. And signing people up for that is much harder than I can get up in front of St. Peter's tomorrow on Sunday. We need a laptop. I should just say that. We need a laptop for this family. We don't have the money from that we've had. They've gotten one laptop that was broken, so we need another laptop. Probably getting a laptop would be much easier than getting somebody to sign up for the group to help them do the Octopus Energy thing. Right? Yeah. So you want a laptop, but I do have a lot of flatware. Right? So I appreciate activism. I think getting out and shouting about things is really important. Since I've become a political actor, I've noticed the value of that for signaling with other people your solidarity with people who you want to work with. So it is worth doing that, I think. You should go out to marches when you can, but I think we need to not mistake that for action, right? And also not mistake the fact that you could have somebody in your church who very well vote reform in the next election, who would be very happy to help explain octopus energy to my refugee family. And so we have to look for, I think when we're thinking about community organizing, we're looking for actual solutions to actual problems as opposed to things that make us feel good. I feel really good about my poster in my window, but again, I need to recognize that it's not changing anything necessarily. So what do we do when we community organize? The first thing that we need to do is we need to understand power. We need to understand who has power in the context that we're in. I love this quote. You hear it in community organizing around Citizens UK all the time. You get as much justice as you have the power to compel. Again, this is the bit about community organizing that doesn't feel as good as activism, which is power sits with particular people and they control who gets justice. We might not like it, but that is actually the way that the world works. We can talk about revolution, we can talk about changing everything. I've been involved in a lot of people talking about revolution recently. Revolution is not always nice, like people have this view that we're going to have a revolution and we're going to take down the banks and that's going to be a good thing for everyone. Maybe that's a potential thing that will happen, but I think that from a community organizing perspective, we talk about things that, yes, let's dismantle the banking system, but let's get free school meals, right? Those are the kinds of things that we can actually make progressive change on. And we could actually, if we put a plan together, we can make these kind of real changes in people's lives to affect their living situations. And we need to work with people in power. You might not like who's in power, and this is the part about being nonpartisan, is that you have to work with whoever is in power. Citizens UK has a great reputation of working with people across different political parties. And again, this is why it's important that you don't have people who are political actors also acting in those roles as well. So you understand who has the power. You say, okay, what is the thing that we want to change? What is the thing, the change that we want to bring about? We've identified what it is. I'm going to use a real practical example because it's something that we talked about at St. George's. I've had a couple of meetings there about it. It's about getting a crosswalk, right? So there's a road. I don't remember what road it is particularly. The Hagley Road, yep. So the Hagley Road would really benefit from a crosswalk in one particular place to help people, kids and pupils get across and serve the community. Again, this is not nearly as exciting as some other kind of activism, but when we talk about the sorts of things that would actually change people's lives, a safe way to cross the road is a really important thing. Not just that people won't die, because I've talked about traffic safety a lot recently, and a lot of people say, well, not that many people actually die, and it's such a ridiculous thing to say. It's like, well, only one child has died from a road traffic accident this year. The numbers are good, and you think, well, but if we could just slow down, all of us slow down, we could save no people could die, right? And also, we could create a safer place in our community for crossing the road. It makes your life better if you have a safer place to cross in the road. So, what does the road have to do with the gospel, the mission of the church? The point about crossing the road is that this is a daily thing that people do that really affects their life, and it is something that you could actually make a change in, right? You could speak to your counselors, city councilors. City councilors, it's very much in their interest to get a crosswalk in. As a person who's trying to get crosswalks in different places now, crosswalks are great things for communities. Mosques would be interested in it. If there's a mosque that is served, be interested in it. Schools would be interested in it. Many people would be interested in doing it, right? So you can build an alliance around that crosswalk. I skipped one step there, which is How do you get to know that the crosswalk is the important thing that you need? Well, you get to that because you actually talk to people. And if you talk to people in the community, not telling them, what it is that you're interested in, but talking to them about the issues that they're interested in, things like crosswalks will come up. As a person who knocked doors for, a month last autumn, road safety is a really, really important issue. And one of those things that if you knock on people's doors and ask them what is important to them, road safety is one of those things that comes up again and again and again. Again, it's not something that you would necessarily conceive of by yourself sitting in a PCC meeting, right? But maybe you would. So you find the people who can actually bring that about, find the people in power who can do it, and then you can take action. No permanent enemies, no permanent allies. So somebody helps you on something, that doesn't mean that they're going to help you on something in the future. It's looking for people to work together on particular issues. And realize that people come and go, that institutions change, and that who's in power changes. All these things are important things to take into account. But you can look for the decision maker, find the people who can do it, and say, this is actually something that we could change in our community. So some of the campaigns that we've been working on within Citizens over the last few years are the ones that I've been involved with. Things around pay and housing and work. These are the kinds of things that really affect people's lives. Housing's a huge one, right? Housing, with our refugee family, housing was point number one in trying to find a safe, warm, clean house that wasn't out of the amount of money that they have. When you start getting involved in this very quickly, you realize that people who are living on the margins of society are really, really living on the margins, and all these kinds of stories about people, gaming the system or making it's very much. It might be true in some cases. It's very much a myth, actually, in terms of the people who are trying to get things done, trying to live their lives. It is very, very, very difficult if you aren't established in the way that many people probably in your congregations and your organizations are established. Yeah. The other thing that we've done at Citizens, which is another interesting feature of organizing that's different from, say, local elections, is having assemblies rather than having hustings. So assemblies are when you get the organizations together as groups and you talk about the thing that you're interested in that's important to you, right? So it's in the sense that the church service is organized around communion and celebrating Jesus and the gospel. Assemblies are about the shared interest in the things that you're working on, that you're campaigning on. And you get some of these pictures here from assemblies where we have, in this one here, it's all of the member institutions and people representing the member institutions. I think we got Father George up there. He is in everything, yes. It's probably one of his first things. So, but assemblies are different than hustings, because what happens is you'll get people, bring people in power, they will come, and instead of telling the people in power telling you what they think about things, I did a hustings in Moseley, you get asked questions, I tell you what I think about child poverty, people decide whether they like that or not. The assemblies are different, where we say, this is our group of people, there's 600 of us, we think this about child poverty, do you agree with us? And what will you do to enact our plans about child poverty? Which is a much better way, I think, of talking to politicians and having politicians come to you and tell you what they think. Politicians should come to situations and places and listen to what the group has to say and talk about the ways in which they can accomplish those things for them. Training as well. Anyone who's associated with the St. George's can go on 6-day or 3-day training with Citizens UK. This is me at Queen's Foundation in 2022, maybe. I don't know if you can tell who I am because I look totally different in that picture. I have grown a beard since then. The person on the other picture there is Saeed, who's one of the chief organizers from Citizens. Really great man, leader, important figure in organizing. And we do things, more pictures of Saeed, actually, in terms of community building and these this was during, I think it was during Ramadan last year, was about leadership in different organizations, and Saeed was interviewing leaders in different places and talking to them about the organizations, and both these. This was a mosque, and then Mashkura Begum's Sati House, I don't know, is in Aston. Really great organization for migrant women. Anyway, going to the organizations, listening to people, and talking to them um, about what it is that they're doing, and where those relationships can be built with different other organizations. And then, of course, holding power to account. Here we have there's Andy Street is meeting with us in that one picture there. Yeah, St. Mary's Convent, which is where Citizens is based now, which is yeah, really beautiful place. But anyway, Andy, we were meeting with Andy, talking to him about, I don't remember what that meeting was about particularly. The other picture is with Simon Foster, who's the Police and Crime Commissioner. And again, there's a beardless me meeting him as well. So the basic element of community organizing, this is where I'm going to end. Just, I want to give you one tool. So I've talked a little bit about myself and about how I've come into this. Talked a little bit about the kind of the theory behind community organizing. I talked a little bit about the practice of community organizing, and I want to talk a little bit about that, the basic building block of community organizing being this kind of a one-to-one relationship, a one-to-one relational meeting. What I did at the very beginning here was give you an example of the sorts of things that I would say in a one-to-one with a Christian leader if I was talking to them. So what I did in the beginning there was I shared my journey. I don't like the metaphor of journey as much. My journey to flourish. Should come up with that as a program. The New Church of England's Journey to Flourish. I talked a little bit about my journey, and what I did in that was I recognized, I hope, what you would see as a valuable introduction to me. I didn't talk at all about my academics in the way that I might normally in kind of an academic setting. I talked about my faith. I did so in a way that I'm a pretty open person, but I tried to be open about what I believed and how I felt about my belief, and I did that in a way to talk about. If you look there, animating stories. I told a couple of stories about my experiences, so you understand why I believe what I do, not just that I hold the views that I do because of some concept that I have about God or whatever. I talked about my core values. I think you probably have an idea about what I value after what I talked about, and I talked about what motivated me, like why I do what I do. I hope those sorts of things came up. And when I was, if this was a true one-to-one, we'd have a chance for all of us to do that same sort of thing. And in a one-to-one, I would tend to go first if I was talking about myself, just because I like listening to myself talk. Obviously, I'm a narcissist, but I think by opening that up, I'm able to, I think, to hear more from someone else, because I think, well, if Stephen said that, then I've opened up a little bit as well. I've had conversations with people this last year in particular where I've talked about feelings that I've been having or experiences that I had that you wouldn't normally want to talk about, be embarrassing for people. And every time that I have done that, the other person has responded in some way with telling me about an experience that was similar for them. And I found that to be really powerful. That once you're open with someone and you're vulnerable, I'm not saying be unsafe. You shouldn't do this with everyone. You need to recognize who you can be vulnerable with. But I think kind of making those kinds of I was going to say gamble, taking those sorts of risks is really valuable. And what it does then is you understand people in a way that you don't understand them if you're just like, tell me about what you do, what job you do, right? Tell me about your family. All those things are important, but I think the more that we can understand what motivates people, then we can start to build relationships with people that are meaningful. And if the gospel mission, those sorts of things come about, they come about from that. You can't share the gospel with somebody or talk about mission with somebody if you don't understand where they're coming from. Or you end up like me in Japan, reading John 3:16 with a guy who was planning to kill your grandfather, you know? And maybe he needs to hear John 3:16 in the same way as, you know, a person in the States does, but probably not, right? Probably requires something different. So the gospel compels, and this is how, what I talk about when I say I believe the gospel is something that is not necessarily exclusively Christian. I think it is something that we are all compelled to do, regardless of what you believe. That it's about reducing injustice and working towards a more equitable, a more fair, a more loving world. Love is probably at the very basis of all this, right? Faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love, right? So we need to challenge those injustices. We can't do that just by putting up a poster that says, I'm against racism. Yeah? That's not enough. And we need to be very, very careful, I think, with giving the impression that that's enough. And sometimes I think the campaigns that we run quite often have this idea. I can think of some specific ones in the church I won't mention, but like if you give money to this thing, then you have helped to reduce injustice. You have helped to reduce injustice. That's true, right? If you give 10 pounds to whatever, that's better than not giving 10 pounds, right? But we need to, if we're really going to compel people to act and live in the gospel, it needs to be something that is beyond these kind of putting up posters. So the other thing that is important is to know that the things where injustice is happening in communities requires us to be aware and be, well, I know the word woke has really fallen out of fashion with some people, but that's what it really means. All being woke is just to be aware of injustice in the world, right? So yeah, I'm woke. If woke means being aware of injustice in the world, then yeah, I'm definitely woke. I'm trying to be woke. Woke is not something that you can be. You can't achieve wokeness because you know all of the injustice, right? And a key part of all of this is talking effectively with those around you and listening effectively with those around you. Sorry, my linguist mind says talk, which obviously also includes listening, right? Talk is discourse, right? Interacting with people. So you need to not see community organizing as a way to bring a message to a group. That's a very important bit of this. It's not about, as I'm sharing my story with you, I'm not trying to get you to be a member of the Labour Party. I'm not trying to get you to be a member of Citizens UK. I'm not trying to convince you of any of that, right? In other roles, maybe I would be. But what I'm trying to do is build a connection with you that we can work together on something to affect change within the world. I was going to talk a little bit about a project that I did. I was looking at religious diversity throughout the city. It was a project called Super Diverse City, which I thought was clever. It's not city with a C. Talked to a bunch of different people in different religious organizations, and what I built off of this was this kind of this little infographic, which you can get at St. George's if you'd like to. Great, thank you very much. But basically, oh, really? Okay, great. Yeah, it must have been. Yeah. I can't say whether or not Charlotte participated in this, or indeed if I've written about you at all. Everyone's anonymous, but yeah, that is true. Yeah. But so I kind of took the idea of the one-to-one in a way of thinking about talking about your faith, and really it was around this idea about telling your story, don't say, I mean, you can say I'm a Christian. I mean, that's an important bit of it. But I don't want to hear that you're a Christian. I want to know what Christianity means to you. What does it mean that you're a Christian, right? And I think sometimes, it's funny we were talking about Pete and the collar. Like, I look at Pete in a different way now because he's wearing a collar. Not in a negative way, in any sort of way, but it changes how I view you, right? And that's a bit unfortunate in some sense, right? I mean, it's good in some senses, but it's unfortunate in some senses because now I make assumptions, well, not because I know you personally, but I think people probably, if you're walking around with just a normal shirt on, or if you're wearing a collar, people will make assumptions about who you are, what you believe, what you think. If you wear a hijab, that's another example of almost exactly the same kind of thing, where people look at you and say, I shouldn't say almost exactly the same kind of thing, in terms of religious identification. So I look at you with a collar, I don't have any question, is Pete a Sikh, right? I know your religious identity because of that, right? In the same way that we might look at someone in a hijab and say, I know their religious identity because they're wearing a hijab. You know something about that, but you actually don't know much, right? And seeing Pete in a collar, I don't actually know much about what he really thinks or believes, but I have kind of I've made some assumptions about it. And I think that the point about this is needing to get past that and talk about faith in a way that is really not about it being personal to you. I don't want it to be personal to you, but to explain what it means for you and what it means in terms of how you see the world. And then do the same and allow the same for the people that you're talking to is really the important bit. So if I'm going to say, I don't like it when people judge me if I say that I'm a Christian and they have these sort of negative views of Christianity, right? We have to allow that then of everybody else to say, well, we can't hold those same views about people of different faiths, and we have to be willing to change our minds as well. So these are the things that I think that if I was saying to you, what you say, Stephen, what should I do this week? I'm interested in community organizing. I'm interested in getting connected. You're going to St. George's already. Obviously, the connection there is to get involved with community organizing at St. George's. If you're interested in sort of the practice of it, I would commit to doing a couple of one-to-ones and saying, I'm gonna have an intentional conversation with someone that I wouldn't normally have an intentional conversation with. Just go do it. And community organizers, I think they are committed to do some crazy amount of one-to-ones a week. It's like 3 or 4 a day. Because the lifeblood of community organizing is knowing what is happening in communities. And I'll say one last thing from my political hat on. I had several cabinet members come out and support my campaign while I was campaigning. Great people, really respected them. But if you're not going around and talking to people every day, and you're being driven around from place to place where people are presenting them in different things, you do not get a view of what's happening on the doorstep of people. And that happens in any organization, right? The more time you have to do administrative stuff, the less time you have to talk to people. And I think, and credit where credit is due, those people did come out for an hour and knock on doors and talk to people on the doorstep. So some people talk about politicians being, detached. The ones that I saw, and these are quite senior people, were actually out talking to people as well. So that's to say, and that's not because they're a member of a particular party, it's because people who are doing those roles actually do care a lot of the times. And they do want to make the world a better place. And we might disagree with how they're doing it, but it is worth coming back to that. That's the end of my talk. Thank you. I'm going to shut off the recording now so we can have our discussion, but thank you for letting me record it.